Hey family, this is day 80 of our Reading Through the Bible Together in a Year series. Today we're in the book of 1 Samuel or Shemuel, and we're finishing up with chapter 14 starting in verse 24, going all the way through chapter 16 today. Now remember, in the book of Samuel is where Israel asks for their first human king, and God tells Samuel, like, don't worry, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Just let them know that a king is going to be terrible to them and do all this stuff. And Samuel tells them, and they're like, no, we want a king anyway. We want a king to go out before us and lead us and lead us into victory and all these things. And so Samuel's like, fine. And God picks Saul, a Benjaminite, a donkey herder who doesn't know where his donkeys are. I think that we're supposed to know that on purpose. But anyways, where we were yesterday is that Jonathan, who is Saul's son, is acting on great faith in battles against the Philistines. And one particular thing he says in the beginning of chapter 14 is that God doesn't need a small army or a big army. God is just going to be victorious. Or Yahweh specifically is going to be victorious. And so we're going to see a little bit of how that story plays out in chapter 14. So let's get started. The men of Israel were distressed that day, for Shaul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed is the man who eats any food until it is evening, and I am avenged of my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. All the people came into the forest, and there was honey on the ground. When the people had come to the forest, behold, honey was dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan didn't hear when his father commanded the people with the oath. Therefore he put out the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth. And his eyes brightened. Then one of the people answered and said, Your father directly commanded the people with an oath, saying, Cursed is the man who eats food today. So the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, My father has troubled the land. Please look how my eyes have brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if perhaps the people had eaten freely today of the plunder of their enemies which they found? For now there has been no great slaughter among the Philistines. They struck the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ayalon. The people were very faint, and the people pounced on the plunder, and took sheep, cattle, and calves, and killed them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Shaul, saying, Behold, the people are sinning against Yahweh, in that they eat meat with the blood. He said, You have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me today. Shaul said, Disperse yourselves among the people and tell them, Every man bring me here his ox and every man his sheep, and kill them here, and eat, and don't sin against Yahweh in eating meat with the blood. All the people brought every man his ox with him that night, and killed them there. Shaul built an altar to Yahweh. This was the first altar that he built to Yahweh. Shaul said, Let's go down after the Philistines by night, and take plunder among them until the morning light. Let's not leave a man of them. They said, Do whatever seems good to you. Then the priest said, Let's draw near here to God. Shaul asked counsel of God. Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he didn't answer him that day. Shaul said, Draw near here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see in whom this sin has been today. For as Yahweh lives, who saves Israel, though it is in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people who answered him. Then he said to all Israel, You be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. The people said to Shaul, Do what seems good to you. Therefore Shaul said to Yahweh the God of Israel, Show the right. Jonathan and Shaul were chosen, but the people escaped. Shaul said, Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son. Jonathan was selected. Then Shaul said to Jonathan, Tell me what you have done. Jonathan told him and said, I certainly did taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and behold, I must die. Shaul said, God do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. The people said to Shaul, Shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it, as Yahweh lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God today. So the people rescued Jonathan, so he didn't die. Then Shaul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Now when Shaul had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, and against the children of Ammon, and against Edom, and against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned himself, he defeated them. He did valiantly and struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them. Now the sons of Shaul were Jonathan, Yishvi, and Malchi-Shua. And the names of his 2 daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merav, and the name of the younger, Michal. The name of Shaul's wife was Achinoam, the daughter of Achimaaz. The name of the captain of his army was Avner, the son of Ner, Shaul's uncle. Kish was the father of Shaul, and Ner the father of Avner, who was the son of Abiel. There was severe war against the Philistines all the days of Shaul. And when Shaul saw any mighty man or any valiant man, he took him into his service. Shamuel said to Shaul, Yahweh sent me to anoint you to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the voice of Yahweh's words. Yahweh of armies says, I remember what Amalek did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way when he came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and don't spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing baby, ox and sheep, and camel and donkey. Shaul summoned the people and counted them in Telaim, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Yehudah. Shaul came to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. Shaul said to the Kenites, Go, depart, go down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them, for you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. Shaul struck the Amalekites from Havilah, as you go to Shur, which is before Egypt. He took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Shaul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, of the cattle, of the fat calves, of the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. Then Yahweh's word came to Shamuel, saying, It grieves me that I have set up Shaul to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments. Shamuel was angry, and he cried to Yahweh all night. Shamuel rose early to meet Shaul in the morning, and Shamuel was told, saying, Shaul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself, turned, passed on, and went down to Gilgal. Shamuel came to Shaul, and Shaul said to him, You are blessed by Yahweh. I have performed the commandment of Yahweh. Shamuel said, Then what does this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the cattle which I hear mean? Shaul said, They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the cattle to sacrifice to Yahweh your God. We have utterly destroyed the rest. Then Shamuel said to Shaul, Stay, and I will tell you what Yahweh said to me last night. He said to him, Say on. Shamuel said, Though you were little in your own sight, weren't you made the head of the tribes of Israel? Yahweh anointed you king over Israel, and Yahweh sent you on a journey and said, Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then didn't you obey Yahweh's voice, but took the plunder, and did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight? Shaul said to Shemuel, But I have obeyed Yahweh's voice, and I have gone the way which Yahweh sent me. And I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the plunder, sheep and cattle, the best of the devoted things, to sacrifice to Yahweh your God in Gilgal. Shemuel said, Has Yahweh as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying Yahweh's voice? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as idolatry and teraphim. Because you have rejected Yahweh's word, he has also rejected you from being king. Shaul said to Shemuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now, therefore, please pardon my sin and turn again with me, that I may worship Yahweh. Shemuel said to Shaul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected Yahweh's word, and Yahweh has rejected you from being king over Israel. As Shemuel turned around to go away, Shaul grabbed the skirt of his robe, and it tore. Shemuel said to him, Yahweh has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. Also the strength of Israel will not lie nor repent, for he is not a man that he should repent. Then Shaul said, I have sinned, yet please honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and come back with me that I may worship Yahweh your God. So Shemuel went back with Shaul, and Shaul worshipped Yahweh. Then Shemuel said, Bring Agag the king of the Amalekites here to me. Agag came to him cheerfully. Agag said, Surely the bitterness of death has passed. Shemuel said, As your sword has made women childless, so your mother will be childless among women. Then Shemuel cut Agag in pieces before Yahweh in Gilgal. Then Shemuel went to Ramah, and Shaul went up to his house to Gibeah of Shaul. Shemuel came no more to see Shaul until the day of his death. But Shemuel mourned for Shaul. Yahweh grieved that he had made Shaul king over Israel. Yahweh said to Shemuel, How long will you mourn for Shaul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Yishai the Bethlehemite, for I have provided a king for myself among his sons. Shemuel said, How can I go? If Shaul hears it, he will kill me. Yahweh said, Take a heifer with you, and say, I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Call Yishai to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. You shall anoint to me him whom I name to you. Shemuel did that which Yahweh spoke, and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling, and said, Do you come peaceably? He said, Peaceably, I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. He sanctified Yishai and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. When they had come, he looked at Eliab, and said, Surely Yahweh's anointed is before him. But Yahweh said to Shemuel, Don't look on his face, or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him, for I don't see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks at the heart. Then Yishai called Avinadav, and made him pass before Shemuel. He said, Yahweh has not chosen this one either. Then Yishai made Shammah to pass by. He said, Yahweh has not chosen this one either. Yishai made 7 of his sons to pass before Shemuel. Shemuel said to Yishai, Yahweh has not chosen these. Shemuel said to Yishai, Are all your children here? He said, There remains yet the youngest. Behold, he is keeping the sheep. Shemuel said to Yishai, Send and get him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, with a handsome face and good appearance. Yahweh said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Shemuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the middle of his brothers. Then Yahweh's spirit came mightily on David from that day forward. So Shemuel rose up and went to Ramah. Now Yahweh's spirit departed from Shaul, and an evil spirit from Yahweh troubled him. Shaul's servants said to him, See now, an evil spirit from God troubles you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are in front of you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp. Then when the evil spirit from God is on you, he will play with his hand, and you will be well. Shaul said to his servants, Provide me now a man who can play well, and bring him to me. Then one of the young men answered and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Yishai the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and Yahweh is with him. Therefore Shaul sent messengers to Yishai, and said, Send me David your son, who is with the sheep. Yishai took a donkey loaded with bread, a container of wine, and a young goat, and sent them by David his son to Shaul. David came to Shaul and stood before him. He loved him greatly, and he became his armor-bearer. Shaul sent to Yishai, saying, Please let David stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. When the spirit from God was on Shaul, David took the harp and played with his hand, so Shaul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So 3 things I want to draw your attention to at the end of today's reading. The first thing is that Saul does this thing where he tells everybody, don't eat any of the honey because anybody who eats the honey will die. But his own son Jonathan doesn't hear him make the ordinance or whatever. And Jonathan eats the honey, says it's great, tells all of Israel, hey man, this is good stuff. Maybe this would be good for us if we acted like the plunder from our enemies was a good thing. But then, Saul finds out that it's Jonathan that has disobeyed the order and says, well, I made a vow to Yahweh, now you have to die. Who does that sound like? Who is it that vows to Yahweh, says, whatever, if you give me a victory today, whatever eats or whatever meets me at the gate, I will sacrifice to you, and it's his own daughter. That would be Jephthah, one of the judges who doesn't even know who Yahweh's character is anymore. And so we're kind of seeing that in Saul a little bit. He's He's thinking that he made this ordinance that whoever will die if they disobey and eat the honey, and then Jonathan does it unknowingly, and Saul is like, well, you're going to have to die. And Jonathan is even like, yeah, you're right, I got to die. And then the people of Israel, they recognize that Jonathan is the reason why they were victorious that day. So they save his life. It's just an interesting story to compare him to Jephthah, or to compare Saul to Jephthah, one of the judges. The second thing is this whole business where God tells Saul to go and to wipe out the Amalekites and just utterly destroy them, right? Destroy every single thing. Destroy everything in the land, all the people, all of the animals, all the stuff, like just destroy it all. But Saul and the Israelites don't destroy everything. They kill all the people, but they save the king, Agag, or Agog, or Agog, however we want to say that, and a lot of the sheep and cattle. And when Samuel confronts Saul about this, he's like, you didn't obey God. And Saul's like, but it's okay. Like, we got the best of the sheep and the cattle to make sacrifices to God, right? Saul's under this impression that God's opinion can be swayed with a animal sacrifice, right? We don't necessarily have to obey God specifically. We just have to, give him good sacrifices that he enjoys. A transactional relationship, right? A very Cain-esque aspect, perspective. And that's not right, and I love what Samuel says. Let's see. What is it exactly? Samuel says in chapter 15, verse 22, Samuel said, has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as the iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Right? And that goes along with the idea later on. I think it's in the prophet Hosea where he says, where God specifically says, you're not taking care of the alien, the orphan, and the widow. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. We're seeing that character of God painted over and over again where, yes, God gives a sacrificial system and has specific sacrifices for specific things and uses sacrifice for the sake of reconciliation after sin has been made. However, it's not that the sacrifice is the important thing in God's eyes. It's the obedience. It's the allegiance of his people to his commands and his law and who he is and the transformation of the human heart, right? That's what God is after. He doesn't really care about the sacrifice that much. So interesting. I love that there. And then the last thing is we just get introduced into our new main character for a lot of the Old Testament, which is David, or David. And we love the fact that Samuel goes and sees David's older brothers, Eliab and Abinadab and Shammah. And clearly these tall, strong men, clearly this is the king that God is choosing. And God's like, no, I look at the heart. And so he picks David, who we find is the youngest and the shepherd of sheep. And so now we have a contrast, right? We have the contrast of Saul, the super tall, strong warrior type guy who is the donkey herder that can't find his donkeys. And then we have David, the shepherd who does anything to protect his sheep, and Yahweh is with him. And so we're supposed to see that contrast there. And so now we continue on with the story of David from here out. So good reading today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. I hope the rest of this day is wonderful.